How Secret Agent Zero Stole Japan's Naval Blueprints in Broad Daylight. A complete story in 8 chapters. Chapter 1. The Impossible Target. March 1941. Manila, Philippines. Lieutenant Commander James Nakamura, codenamed Zero, sat in a cafe overlooking Manila Bay studying photographs of the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries facility in Yokohama, Japan. At 36, James was one of U.S. naval intelligence's most valuable assets. American-born but of Japanese descent, fluent in Japanese, educated at Tokyo Imperial University, he could move through Japanese society in ways no Caucasian agent could. His handler, Commander William Hayes, spread additional photos across the table. This is the target, Mitsubishi's Naval Design Bureau, Building 7, 3rd floor. They're designing Japan's next generation of aircraft carriers. We need those blueprints. Why? Japan isn't at war with us. Not yet, but every intelligence assessment says war is coming. Japan's expanding through Asia, we've imposed oil embargoes, tensions are escalating. When war comes, and it will, we need to know what we're facing. These new carriers could be operational within 2 years. We need their specifications, armor thickness, speed, aircraft capacity, defensive armament, everything. James studied the photos. The Mitsubishi facility was in the heart of Yokohama, surrounded by military installations, constantly patrolled. This is suicide. Even if I get inside, security will be overwhelming. Which is why you're not breaking in at night. You're walking in during business hours. James looked at Hayes incredulously. In broad daylight? Exactly. Night break-ins trigger alarms, security sweeps, investigations. But during business hours, thousands of people move through that facility. Engineers, managers, contractors, delivery personnel, one more Japanese face won't be noticed. Except I don't work there. I'll have no credentials, no authorization, no reason to be in the Naval Design Bureau. Hayes slid a folder across the table. Lieutenant Yamamoto Kenji, structural engineer from Mitsubishi's Nagasaki office, temporarily assigned to Yokohama to consult on carrier deck reinforcement designs. That's your cover identity. We've created complete documentation, employment records, university transcripts, professional certifications. You are Yamamoto Kenji. James examined the forged documents. They were perfect. Correct paper, authentic seals, proper formatting. How do I access the blueprints? The Naval Design Bureau maintains a secure archive on the 3rd floor. Access requires authorization from a senior design engineer. We can't forge that. The authorization system uses personal seals that are impossible to replicate. So you won't use authorization. You'll use persuasion. Persuasion? Social engineering. You're a visiting engineer with legitimate credentials. You need to consult design documents for your work. You approach someone with access, establish rapport, convince them to help you. People want to be helpful, especially to colleagues. You exploit that. And when they realize the documents I'm accessing have nothing to do with deck reinforcement, that's why you need to work fast. Get in, find the carrier blueprints, photograph them, get out. You'll have maybe 30 minutes before someone questions what you're doing. James felt the weight of the mission. When? You leave for Japan in 3 days. You'll enter the country as Yamamoto Kenji, returning from a business trip to Manila. Once in Yokohama, you have 1 week to prepare, then you execute. This is the most critical intelligence operation in the Pacific. We need those blueprints. Chapter 2. The Infiltration. April 1941, Yokohama, Japan. James arrived in Japan on April 8th, traveling under his cover identity. Japanese customs barely glanced at his forged papers. Yamamoto Kenji had perfect employment history, legitimate business reasons for travel, nothing suspicious. He checked into a modest hotel near the Mitsubishi facility and spent 3 days conducting reconnaissance. He observed the facility's rhythms, when shifts changed, when security was most alert, when the building was busiest, and one more person would be least noticeable. He identified his target day, Thursday, April 17th at 10:30 a.m. Mid-morning, when engineers were focused on work, when administrative staff were processing paperwork, when security was routine rather than heightened. On April 16th, James conducted a dry run. He dressed in a business suit appropriate for a professional engineer, carried a leather briefcase containing notebooks and technical drawings that would support his cover, and walked past the Mitsubishi facility without entering. He timed his walk, 17 minutes from his hotel to the facility entrance. Security checkpoint, 2 guards, but they were checking badges, not identities. Building 7 entrance, 30 meters from the main gate. Stairs to 3rd floor, 42 steps. Everything depended on confidence. If he walked in like he belonged, if his papers were in order, if he acted as though consulting design documents was routine, he'd be invisible. On the morning of April 17th, James woke up at 6 a.m., reviewed his cover story one final time, and prepared the tools he'd need: a miniature camera concealed in his briefcase, fast film for photographing documents, and a confident smile. At 10:15 a.m., he approached the Mitsubishi facility.
Chapter 3. The Approach. April 17, 1941, 10:15 a.m., Yokohama. James walked through the main gate with purposeful stride, his forged Mitsubishi employee badge clipped to his jacket. The security guards glanced at the badge, saw the authentic design, and waved him through without question. Inside Building 7, the lobby buzzed with activity. Engineers discussed technical problems. Administrative staff carried files. No one paid attention to one more Japanese engineer entering the building. James took the stairs to the 3rd floor, his briefcase in hand, his expression focused but not anxious. He'd studied photographs of the floor layout. The Naval Design Bureau occupied the eastern wing. The secure archive was in room 307. He walked down the corridor, observing nameplates on doors, looking for his target, a senior design engineer who might grant him access to the archive. In room 312, he found what he was looking for: Takeshi Tanaka, chief naval architect. The door was open. Tanaka sat at his desk, reviewing technical drawings. James knocked lightly. "Excuse me, Tanaka-san?" Tanaka looked up. "Yes?" "I'm Yamamoto Kenji, structural engineer from the Nagasaki office. I've been temporarily assigned here to consult on carrier deck reinforcement. I was told you might assist me with accessing some design documentation." Tanaka studied him. This was the critical moment. If Tanaka questioned his credentials, asked for verification, contacted Nagasaki to confirm, the mission would fail. But Tanaka simply nodded. "Ah, yes, the deck reinforcement project. What documentation do you need?" "I'd like to review the structural specifications for the new carrier designs, specifically the deck load distribution calculations and support beam configurations. Those documents are in the secure archive. Come with me." James' heart pounded, but his expression remained calm, professional. He followed Tanaka down the corridor to room 307. Tanaka used his personal seal to authorize entry, and they entered the archive, a room filled with filing cabinets containing Japan's naval design secrets. Chapter 4. The Theft. April 17, 1941, 10:47 a.m., Secure Archive, Room 307. The archive was organized by project: battleship designs, cruiser specifications, destroyer plans, and, most critically, aircraft carrier blueprints. Tanaka walked to a filing cabinet labeled Project Shokaku, Fleet Carrier Development. He pulled out a thick folder containing design documents. "Here are the structural specifications you'll need. The deck reinforcement calculations are in Section 3. You can review them at that table." He pointed to a work table in the corner. "Thank you, Tanaka-san. This is very helpful." Tanaka nodded and left the archive, returning to his office. He'd been helpful, as Hayes had predicted. People want to assist colleagues. It's human nature. James was alone in the archive, with unrestricted access to Japan's most secret naval designs. He had perhaps 20 minutes before someone questioned why a visiting engineer needed so much time with carrier blueprints that had little to do with deck reinforcement. James opened the Shokaku folder. Inside were complete specifications for Japan's newest fleet carriers: overall dimensions and displacement, armor thickness and distribution, engine specifications and maximum speed, aircraft capacity and hangar arrangements, anti-aircraft armament, fuel capacity and operational range. Everything U.S. naval intelligence needed to assess Japanese carrier capabilities. James removed the miniature camera from his briefcase. The camera was disguised as a fountain pen, German-made, provided by OSS Technical Services, capable of photographing documents with remarkable clarity. He began systematically photographing each page. The camera held 36 exposures. He had to prioritize. Most critical specifications first, secondary details if time permitted. Hull cross-sections, photographed. Armor diagrams, photographed. Engine specifications, photographed. Aircraft capacity charts, photographed. At 11:03 a.m., 16 minutes after entering the archive, he heard footsteps in the corridor. Someone was approaching. He quickly returned the Shokaku documents to their folder, replaced it in the filing cabinet, and sat at the work table with his notebook, appearing to be taking notes from memory. A middle-aged woman entered, an administrative clerk. She glanced at James, saw him working at the table, and proceeded to a filing cabinet on the opposite side of the room. James continued his charade, writing technical notes that appeared relevant to deck reinforcement, but were actually meaningless calculations. The clerk found the file she needed and left. James exhaled slowly. The close call reminded him of his vulnerability. He needed to finish quickly.
Chapter 5. The Complication. April 17, 1941, 11:15 a.m. Secure Archive. James had photographed the primary carrier specifications, but the mission parameters included secondary objectives if time permitted: destroyer designs, submarine specifications, naval aviation technology. He moved to the destroyer files. Project Kagero, new fleet destroyer class. He photographed key specifications: speed, armament, anti-submarine capabilities. At 11:22 a.m., Takeshi Tanaka returned to the archive. "Yamamoto-san, have you found everything you need?" James maintained his composure. "Yes, thank you. The specifications are very helpful. I'm just finishing my notes." Tanaka looked at the work table. James's notebook was open, displaying technical calculations. But Tanaka's expression shifted slightly. Confusion, or perhaps suspicion. "May I see your notes? I'm curious about your reinforcement approach." This was dangerous. James's notes were deliberate nonsense, designed to look technical but not withstand expert scrutiny. "Of course," James handed over the notebook, maintaining confident eye contact. Tanaka reviewed the notes, his brow furrowing. "These calculations, this isn't the standard approach for deck reinforcement. What methodology are you using?" James had prepared for this moment. "It's an experimental approach we're testing in Nagasaki. Distributed load compensation rather than concentrated beam reinforcement. We believe it may be more efficient for carrier operations." "Interesting. I haven't seen this methodology before. Which professor taught you this approach?" "Professor Watanabe at Tokyo Imperial University. He's been developing alternative structural theories. Ah, Watanabe. Yes, I know his work. Well, I hope your experimental approach proves successful. James had passed the test. But the close call meant he needed to leave now. Continuing would increase risk exponentially. Thank you for your assistance, Tanaka-san. I have everything I need. You're leaving already? You've only been here 30 minutes. I work quickly, and I need to return to my hotel to develop these calculations further. Tanaka nodded, still slightly puzzled but not suspicious enough to challenge further. James left the archive, walked down the corridor with measured pace, not hurried, not leisurely, just a professional engineer concluding his business. He descended the stairs, crossed the lobby, approached the security checkpoint. The guard glanced at his badge. Leaving already, Yamamoto-san? Yes, I have completed my consultation. The guard waved him through. James walked out of Building 7, out of the Mitsubishi facility, into the streets of Yokohama. He'd done it. He'd stolen Japan's naval blueprints in broad daylight. Chapter 6. The Extraction. April 17th to 20th, 1941, from Yokohama to Manila. James didn't return to his hotel. That would be the first place Japanese counterintelligence would search if his infiltration was discovered. Instead, he went directly to a safe house maintained by U.S. Naval Intelligence, a small apartment above a noodle shop rented under a false name, unknown to Japanese authorities. He developed the film using chemicals and equipment pre-positioned in the safe house. The photographs were perfect. Every page clearly legible, every specification captured. For 2 days, James waited in the safe house, monitoring Japanese radio broadcasts for any indication the security breach had been discovered. Nothing. The theft remained undetected. On April 19th, he left the safe house and traveled to Yokosuka, a port city south of Yokohama. From there, he boarded a commercial steamer to Shanghai, a neutral port where American vessels operated freely. His cover story, Yamamoto Kenji was returning to Manila after completing his Yokohama consultation. Japanese customs at Yokosuka checked his papers, found nothing suspicious, and cleared him for departure. The steamer reached Shanghai on April 20th. James transferred to an American merchant vessel bound for Manila, finally leaving Japanese-controlled territory. On April 23rd, he arrived in Manila and delivered the photographed blueprints to Commander Hayes. Hayes reviewed the intelligence, his expression transforming from skepticism to amazement. "You did it. You actually did it. These are complete specifications for their new carriers." "Operation successful, sir." "More than successful, Zero. This is the most significant intelligence coup in the Pacific. These blueprints will inform our carrier design, our tactical planning, our strategic assessment of Japanese naval capabilities. You may have changed the course of the coming war."
Chapter 7. The Impact. April-December 1941. Washington, D.C. and Pearl Harbor. The stolen blueprints were analyzed by U.S. Naval Intelligence, revealing critical information about Japanese carrier capabilities. The Shokaku-class carriers were formidable, large, fast, well-armored, capable of carrying 72 aircraft. They represented a significant advancement in Japanese naval aviation. But they had vulnerabilities. The armor was concentrated around critical areas, but thinner on the flight deck than American designs. Fuel storage was less protected. Anti-aircraft coverage had blind spots. These vulnerabilities informed U.S. carrier doctrine and attack strategies that would later prove decisive in battles like Midway. The blueprints also revealed Japan's ambitious naval expansion program. The scale of construction suggested Japan was preparing for major military operations, not just defensive posturing. James's intelligence was briefed to President Roosevelt, to the Secretary of the Navy, to fleet commanders in the Pacific. It influenced strategic planning at the highest levels. But on December 7, 1941, despite all warnings, Pearl Harbor was attacked. The intelligence about Japanese capabilities hadn't prevented war, it had simply prepared America for it. When war came, James was offered positions in military intelligence, strategic planning, propaganda operations. He declined all of them. "I did my part," he told Commander Hayes. "I stole the blueprints. I gave you the intelligence. Now let someone else fight the war. You're one of our most valuable assets. Your knowledge of Japan, your ability to operate there, we need you. You need someone who can live with what I did. I can't. I betrayed people who trusted me. Tanaka helped me access those blueprints because he thought I was a colleague. I exploited his helpfulness. That's not something I can do again. It was necessary. You served your country." "I know. But necessary doesn't mean comfortable. I'm done with espionage." James spent the war as a translator, working at a desk in Washington, far from fieldwork, far from deception. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 1945-1991. Washington to California. After the war, James tried to rebuild a normal life. He married, had children, became a professor of Japanese literature at UC Berkeley. But he never forgot April 17, 1941. Never forgot walking into that archive, photographing those blueprints, exploiting Tanaka's trust. In 1952, James learned that Takeshi Tanaka, the naval architect who'd helped him access the blueprints, had died during the war, killed in an American bombing raid on Yokohama in 1945. James felt crushing guilt. He'd stolen secrets from a man who'd been kind to him, helpful, trusting. And that man had died in a war. Those stolen secrets had helped America win. For decades, James never spoke about his wartime service. His family knew he'd worked in translation during the war. They didn't know he'd been Agent Zero, the operative who'd pulled off one of the most daring intelligence operations of World War II. In 1991, 50 years after the operation, U.S. naval intelligence declassified James's mission. Journalists discovered his story, wanted interviews. James, now 86, agreed to speak once. "Mr. Nakamura, you stole Japanese naval blueprints in broad daylight. That's extraordinary. How did you do it?" "By exploiting human nature. People want to help colleagues. They want to be useful. They trust credentials that look official. I used that. Walked in with confidence, presented forged papers, asked for help, and received it. It wasn't extraordinary. It was manipulation. But you served your country. You provided intelligence that helped win the war. I also betrayed a man who trusted me. Tanaka helped me because he thought I was a fellow engineer. He had no reason to doubt me. I exploited that trust, stole secrets, and contributed to a war effort that eventually killed him. Was that service? Or was that just using people?"
You're being too hard on yourself. It was war. Deception was necessary. Maybe, but that doesn't make it honorable. Necessary and honorable aren't the same thing. What do you want people to understand about your mission? That intelligence work isn't glorious. It's using people, exploiting trust, living with guilt. I walked into that facility, smiled at people, acted friendly, and stole their secrets. They trusted me because I looked like them, spoke their language, presented credentials that seemed authentic. That's not heroism. That's deception. Effective deception, yes, but deception nonetheless. Do you regret it? James was silent for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that stopping Japanese militarism required methods like mine. I regret that Tanaka died. But do I regret stealing those blueprints? No, because the intelligence saved American lives, informed our strategies, helped win a war against a regime that was committing atrocities across Asia. That mattered, but it doesn't erase the human cost of how I obtained it. Thank you for sharing your story, Mr. Nakamura. Thank you for letting me finally explain. For 50 years, I couldn't talk about this, couldn't process the guilt, couldn't explain the complexity. Now, at the end of my life, I can finally say, I was Agent Zero. I stole Japan's naval blueprints. It was necessary, it was effective, and it haunted me for 50 years. All three things are true.